All right, so here's a real quick demonstration of the form that we're going to build all the way from the very beginning to the end. Okay, so as we can see, we cannot click on our submit form because nothing is valid yet. So we have validation that's applied to both the name and also the description. So we can see how these animate in will be covering all that. And we can see this field is currently required. So if I just hit F or any type of character, it will go away. In this field here, we have a description that's needs to be between 30 and 500 characters. So, if I just paste this in real quickly, it goes away and we can submit our form very easily. And at this point, you could save it to a database or do whatever you want. Now, we also have something down here that really demonstrates the power of reactive forms, which is a minimum of 3 characters checkbox. So right now, if I simply click out of here and I just hit our little F key here, and if we turn on, it's going to change the validation that's required for our name input. And the reason you would potentially want to do something like this in a real case scenario is dependent upon somebody chooses a checkbox or changes any other value to something, and it may have to change your validation requirements on your other input fields. All right, so we're going to be covering all of that. So let's go ahead and get started. Oh, but real quick, before we begin, make sure you check out my site, coursetro.com, where you're going to find a bunch of courses on modern design and development. A lot are free, and the others you can access for the cost of buying me like a 6-pack each month. That's it. Now, also, it probably wouldn't hurt to subscribe here on YouTube, and be sure to make sure the notifications are turned on. All right, let's get back to it. All right, so just so we're on the same page, we're going to use the Angular command line interface to start a new project. Now, if you need help with this process, such as installing and needing all the dependencies such as Node.js and NPM, then check out the free Angular 4 from scratch course that's located at coursetro.com. So assuming you have everything you need, let's go ahead and we'll type in ng new, and we'll just name this ng forms. So I'm going to pause while this installs. All right, and then we'll cd into it, which is cd ng-forms. And we'll go ahead and run ng-serve with the open flag, which will open up the browser automatically, whatever you have running as default of localhost 4200. All right, and there we go. This is our default Angular 4 app that has started. Now, by the way, if you're watching this in the future and it's Angular 5, that doesn't necessarily mean that this tutorial is broke or outdated. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our code editor now and open up the project. And the first thing that we need to do before we construct any type of form is to import the Reactive Forms module into our app.module.ts file. And that's located in our source, app, and right here. Okay, so what we want to do first is we're going to add the Reactive Forms module into this right here. And this is included in the Angular Forms library. We'll copy that, and then we're going to add a comma just after HTTP module and add it as an import. And we'll save it. Okay, great. So now, at this point, you could either choose to start going into your template and defining the HTML for your form, or you can go to your component. Really, it just depends on your own preferences. So we're going to work within the component code first. So we have to first start by importing some necessary form-specific functions in the component that will house the form. So that for us is going to be just this the standard app component right here. So we're going to import 3 different form classes from the Angular Forms library. That is the form builder, our form group, and the validators. So each form that we have is going to be bound to an instance of form group. And then we use the form builder right here to handle form control creation. And within that, we use the validators to set up validation for each of our form inputs. So you'll get a better understanding of how this works as we progress. So now what we want to do is within the class here, we're going to get rid of this title. We're going to define just a few different properties. So I'm going to paste this in based on the written tutorial that is at coursetro.com, and just give you a quick explanation real quickly of what is going on here with these properties. So first we have our property right here called rform, which is bound to form group. and we have a post of type any. So when we handle form submission, this is going to be in reference to that. We also have the description of type string bound to just empty, and also the name, and that's bound to nothing as well, and it's the string. So our form, again, it just has a name and a description primarily. So now within the constructor, we're going to use dependency injection. This is going to be private form builder to form builder. All right. And next, this is where we specify the validation. So we reference our form. And by the way, that's in reference to reactive forms. And then FB group. All right. So now we have really 3 different inputs that are a part of our form. So first we have name. And inside of here, we add, for the first argument, we're going to leave as null, as the first argument allows you to specify a form value. So we're not going to do that. The next is where we set up our validation, and this is where we reference our validators class up here. So we'll go ahead and just say that the name is required. So to do that, validators dot required. That's it. Very, very, very simple. So let's go ahead and I'm going to come over here. We'll paste this. We're going to change this to description. And let's say, for instance, that this particular input, we want to have multiple validation requirements. So not only will it be required, but maybe when we want to have a minimum length and a maximum length, which is obviously a common validation requirement. So the way we do this is we use first validators.compose. So right before this, validators.compose, and then we wrap it in a parenthesis and a bracket. So we'll close this out real quick. So it's going to be required, and then we just start separating this right here by a comma. And then we reference validators again. Dot minimum length, so min length. We'll say 30. And then validators dot max length, and we'll make this 500. All right, so what we want to do next is, also don't forget to add at the end our parenthesis and a closing bracket over here. All right, and also we're going to have that checkbox, and that's not going to be required. However, we need to reference so we can access it later on when we do the setup for that checkbox and making it change the validation on our name input here. So that looks like simply validate, which will be the name. And then we'll just set it to empty right there. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll save that. So now we want to add a custom method of add post for handling the submitted form. So just beneath the constructor, we'll make add post. We'll accept post here. And this dot description equals post dot description. And this dot name equals post dot name. So this is where you would, for example, if you had a backend or an API of some sort, you would make the call to your service to store it or do whatever you want with this information. But right now we're just setting our description in name bound to the submitted description in name from the form. All right, so for now, that's it for our app component. Let's go ahead and focus on the HTML. So Control B again to hide that. All right, so there's a fair amount of HTML involved here. And what I want to do first before we begin that section is I'm going to import the front-end framework called Foundation, which I use a lot in my tutorials. And it's just real quick and easy for structuring and setting up a form or a layout of a website. So it's basically a competitor to Bootstrap. So we're going to hit Control B and we're going to go down to our index.html, and I'm going to copy and paste just above the closing head tag this line right here. So if I hit Control B, you'll see everything you need. And if you want to go to the written tutorial of this tutorial, the written version, you can just copy this from the tutorial right here. And that's just going to give us foundation right there. All right, so now let's go back to our HTML real quickly and get started. So I'm going to copy our first line. Let's get rid of all this stuff. All right, so what is happening here? Okay, so basically we're just saying that if the name property does not exist, then show everything that's going to be inside of this div. So real quickly, we'll just go ahead and close that off. And so if the name property does exist, we're going to go show form info, which is going to be a local variable, local template variable. And the way we access that, which we can go ahead and do that real quickly, I'm going to copy and paste that blip in real quick. So we use ng template, and then we put a hash sign with the name, so form info. All right, so if name does exist, or if they already submitted the form successfully, then it's going to show this and not the stuff up here. All right, so does it make sense? Hopefully. So we have a div class of form container. We have a div class of row columns. This is specific to foundation. It just basically helps structure a simple container. And then we have interpolation of the name and description properties that we define in our component file right here and here. So it's just going to show us what the user submitted. All right, so let's go back here. And the next section is the form element. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this in. Also close it off right here. So, all right, so when you're using reactive forms on the form element right here, you have to wrap form group in brackets, and we bind it to our form. And remember, that's the name that we gave it in our component, our form as form group. All right, so then we use event binding on ng submit. So when the form is submitted, then we're going to call add post, and we're going to post or pass in our form.value, which that will send in all of the input values that are contained within this form right here to our method. All right, so next I'm going to go ahead and simply type out the rest here. Class equals form container. Again, this is some custom CSS that we will paste in a little bit. Div class equals row columns. So it's structured similar to our ng template down there. And first we have, I'm going to go ahead and just copy a little bit of this. Have a title right here. And then we have our first input. So we have our label of name. Input type is text. And form control name equals name. So this right here, name has to match this right here. So this controls the validation of this element, this input element with the name, the form control name of name. Very, very simple. So next we have a text area for description, and it's the same exact thing. We have our form control name of description, matches up to our component description. There we go. Again, very simple. And then also, we're going to have a checkbox. So we'll have a label and an input type of checkbox. Here's our label right here on line 17. And then 18, we have a type of checkbox. Name is validate. Control name is validate. The value is 1. So if it's checked, that's the value it's going to be passing on to our add post through our form.value. Okay, so then finally, we just have a submit button. There's nothing special about this, with exception to the property binding that we have on the disabled attribute. And this is disabled if the form is not, which is indicated by this not operator here, if it's not valid. So if it's not valid, disabled will be added to this button and you won't be able to click it. If it is, this will be removed. Okay. So that's pretty good for now. Let's go ahead and save that. And before we actually check this out in the browser, I want to real quickly just go ahead and style the form. And so this would probably be a good point to head on over to the browser, check out the written tutorial, and you'll see a section called styling the form. And we're just going to copy and paste just a few rule sets in 2 different files. So Control B, I'm going to go to styles.css and paste this in. It's just 2 rule sets, or basically 1 import, and we're just changing the background on the body. We'll save that, and then we'll go to our app.component.css, and I'm going to paste in just a little bit here, right there. So what's happening as a very quick exclamation, we have the form container, and that's just kind of structure of the container that's going to house everything. It makes the background white, gives us some padding. We have alert, which we're not going to mess with the alert yet because we haven't integrated it. We'll cover that shortly in this video. We have our button and just styling a couple different things in an animation for our alerts. We don't have to worry about any of that right now, but go ahead and save that and visit your browser. Again, make sure your ng-serve command is ran. And here we go. So if we click out of it, we don't have any type of message because we didn't do that in the template just yet. But we can notice that the submit form, we cannot touch, cannot submit it. So if I type in, ASDF here, and then also I start doing this so we can get to 30 characters, there we go. Now we can submit the form. Again, if we remove this, can't submit it because it is required. So we'll go ahead and submit it. There you go. So real quickly, this is fine, but it's really not a great user experience. So we should show an actual validation message that lets them know what exactly is needed so they can get to submitting the form, because sometimes that can be confusing and extremely frustrating. So we'll go ahead back to our code here. We're going to go to our app.component.html, and just underneath, depending on where you want this to show up, underneath is pretty much standard. We're going to real quickly reference a div class right here of alert. We're going to add ng-if. All right, so we're going to put a not operator, our form.controls name, so that's in reference to the above control, valid. So it's saying if this is not valid, and our form.controls name dot touched. So real quickly, I'm just to show you what this does, I'm going to remove that. And we're just going to save it just with this first rule right here. We're going to go ahead and I'm just going to put this is required. I'm going to save it. We'll go back to our section right here. All right, we'll see by default when the form loads, it says this is required. So if we don't add that touched requirement, this is going to show up on all of our alerts or our validation requirements. You don't want that, obviously. You only want it to show up when they focused on and off or have touched that given input type field. So let's go ahead and real quickly we'll add this back. I'll save it. And then we'll come back, and now, as you can see, it reloads. And we click off. There it goes. This is required. Okay. So over here, we're not going to bake in the actual message. We're going to use interpolation to show a specific property that we're going to define in our component. So our interpolation brackets, we'll call this title alert. We'll save. Let's go back to our app component and add that real quickly. So title alert of type string equals this field is required. So now we can save it. Real quickly, let's go back. This field is required. Now, why would I want to do that? Because we're going to be using this specific name field right here along with our validate checkbox to change the validation requirements when that checkbox is pressed. All right. So again, you can add this. I'm just going to paste in a second one here for our description validation message. So I'm going to paste this in. It's very similar to the top one. However, the one difference is that we're simply not going to use interpolation. We're just going to put, you must specify a description that's between 30 and 500 characters. And again, this matches up with the requirements in app component because we can see minimum length is 30, max length is 500. Okay, so now we can go ahead and save this, and both of these will work. So down here, and that will go away if you satisfy the needs of the validation. So goodbye. There we go. Now we can submit. All right, that's awesome. So another way to demonstrate the powerful nature of reactive forms is by we're going to utilize this checkbox right here. So nothing's happening when we check on it. All right, so we have to tie into that in our component class real quickly. So we're going to add the ng on init lifecycle hook. All right, so when this component loads, this stuff in here gets ran. So what we'll do is reference this.rform get, and we'll get our validate field, value changes. All right, so all of the fields that are defined up here have the ability for us to tie into value changes. So we're going to subscribe. All right, and inside of here, we're going to add, or pass in rather, validate. And we're going to say if validate, or the value of the validate checkbox equals 1. And if you recall real quickly, we'll see that our checkbox, the value is set to 1. Then inside of here, we'll say this.rform.getName, because that's the validation rules that we want to change. Set validators. And this allows us basically within here to redefine the validation requirements. So let's add in validators.required. So we'll still make it required. And then we'll add a validator's minimum length requirement right here. And we'll just say 3. All right, so it doesn't really make sense, but this is just to show you how to do it, not exactly why. So now we'll also change our title alert, because now not only is it required, it needs 3 characters. So this title alert equals, you need to specify at least 3 characters. Okay. Now we're going to say else right here. And I'm just going to copy real quickly and paste. We're just going to set validators back to the original, which is just right up here. All right, great. So now what we can do is save this, and we'll come back. Actually, at the very beginning, we have to add at the very end of this.rform get name, update value, and validity. And that's giving me a red line because that is not to go there, it's to go here. All right, so we'll go ahead and save this, and we'll go back. All right, so just to demonstrate how this works, right here by default, because this is not checked on, we can satisfy real quickly by hitting any type of character, because it's simply required. Now, if we turn this on, watch what happens. You need to specify at least 3 characters. So there you go. That is basically the power of reactive forms, in that it lets you to control validation through your component class. You can also do unit tests on reactive forms, whereas these are 2 things that you can't really do with template-driven forms, which I'll cover at a later date. But yeah, there we go. So this is my awesome title. Corsetro is great. That's a shameless, plug right there. And then here's my stuff right here. Submit form. There we go. All right, so if you enjoyed this, please do check out corsetro.com. and check out all of our courses. Just released this one over here, right here. And yeah, all right. I'll see you guys very shortly. Make sure to subscribe here on YouTube as well. Goodbye.